Hey, my name is Lo. I've been making the music for films and television series for over 20 years. And a thing that I have been asked a lot lately is, why is it that we can't hear the dialogue in films anymore? I've been thinking about it, and what I find interesting is that, as far as I remember, when I would put a VHS in the tape recorder, it was perfectly audible. I could totally hear the dialogue. And I also don't hear anyone complaining that they need subtitles in cinemas. So why is it that we can't hear the dialogue at home anymore? Let's find out together why it is we can't hear dialogue anymore. Let's talk about the history of sound in film. Because if you're gonna look at films like Terminator, and you go through the big scenes, there's many explosions and running and guns, but still you can hear the dialogue perfectly. And nowadays that is not the case anymore with films. So what happened between then and now that changed that? Let's go back in time and start in the early 80s. Around that time, all audio for films were recorded on tape, and tape is a lot more finicky than digital. There's a lot of tape hiss. So you remember when you put a cassette in your cassette deck, the music sounded okay, but there was this big hiss going on all the time. Well, to beat that is to have louder recordings. But to do that, the room that you're recording in needs to be a lot quieter. So most films were filmed on a soundstage. Well, what are that? Soundstages are basically big hangars where they built sets inside, and these big hangars are sonically treated. So it is really quiet and there is no reverb at all. So it is really easy to record good sound in these sound stages. But don't forget what I just talked about. They were also recording on tape, so it was a lot harder. And nowadays, with digital recordings, it's so much easier to record. And also, the equipment itself just became way better. I record this on a simple and cheap microphone. I'm outside in a forest, there's wind, and still, I hope so, you're able to hear me. Maybe the reason is because actors are not talking as clear anymore. There's a lot of mumbling going on.
What's that?
I just sell people's letters.
Actors like Joaquin Phoenix, who are mostly playing roles that are very quiet and intimate people. And they talk slowly and softly.
You don't listen, do you? I don't think you ever really hear me.
And is that the reason why I can't hear the dialogue anymore? I think it's the opposite. The reason why actors are doing that is the following. We always wanted actors to act as real as possible and be able to shoot these beautiful and intimate characters. But with the older sound devices, that was just not possible. If you would do that, nothing of the dialogue would be left over. Nowadays, the microphones and the recordings are so good that you can mumble and you can whisper, and it totally works, and it's not a problem at all. Things getting mixed afterwards, so it doesn't matter how softly the actor talks. The mixer can just put the fader up and it will be loud enough to hear. So even that is not the problem. So what else is it? I think I can't make this video without talking about Christopher Nolan, who is notoriously known for having films where you can't hear the actors at all.
Well, we better put it out there before the bomb goes off, man.
But this is a whole different case. Christopher Nolan uses that as his own way to tell the story. I don't think you have to hear what actors are saying all the time. In Christopher Nolan's films, things are loud and things are happening and there's big explosions and massive things going on. And yeah, you don't hear the dialogue at this moment.
I'm losing control. Stick.
But guess what? There's a lot of explosions, people running. They're saying something about that they're in distress. You get that. You don't need to hear exactly what they're saying. Those are also not the plot moments. The plot points are clear. So I think the whole Christopher Nolan thing is a non-issue here. He does that out of an artistic choice, and I think that is really cool. People tend to like it because he gets a lot of money to make films, and all of these films are making money in the end. So clearly it's not a huge problem in the end. So to me, Christopher Nolan is a non-issue. Yeah, those are artistic directions. I think it's cool. I understand that there's a lot of people that don't like it at all. People still go to his films and watch them, so he's doing something right there. So I don't think that that is the main problem. The next question that I get a lot is, sound is undervalued. Is that the reason why dialogue is hard to hear? It's all about the picture, and it's all about the big sound effects. Well, yeah, sound is undervalued, we can talk about that, but we're making films. And I understand that if you're recording a scene and the sound is not too clear, but the emotions are right, the editor is gonna take that scene. Emotions will always be more important than the sound. And that's where ADR comes in. What ADR is that after the film is all recorded and after the edit is done, for all the places where the dialogue is not clear, the actors are being called back and they re-record all of that dialogue in a studio to make sure that they have clean recordings of the dialogue. This is another good proof that we have clean dialogue in all these films.
Father Simba was your age. He was afraid of the thunder and would hide behind the keep. And
is it because of the love of loudness? Well, I think there's a truth in that. It partly has to do with new loudness standards. I remember in the early 2000s, everybody was complaining about why are the commercials so much louder than the films? What people started doing is putting a lot of limiters on commercials. I have been working on these commercials myself as well, and the whole plan was to get it as loud as possible because you always want to be just a little louder than the commercial before you, so your commercial pops out. And people were hating that because films were playing at a way lower volume, and then these commercials would kick in and they would be so loud. And because of that, there came new audio regulations. I'm not gonna bother you with all of that, but all in all, what they decided is over time, a film can only be this loud. You know what? I'm gonna show you on a whiteboard and draw it out quickly. This makes my point way easier to communicate. Whiteboard low, coming at ya. We are recording on tape, and let's say this is the lowest volume and this is the loudest volume. As we talked about, tape has a lot of noise, which is called a noise floor. This whole part is noise. So we're trying to stay above that so you don't really hear the noise. So this is where our dialogue lives. Now, we only had a little bit more left over, which we call dynamic range. We only had a little bit left over to go in and do your big booms and the loud music thing over here. It was all a lot more compact. But with digital, everything became a lot cleaner. Let's put the same two lines out again. So, like I said, commercials tried to be louder than the other, and everything was just super loud. this was definitely not working. So new standards came out. It was called EBU 128 in Europe, and they had a different name in North America. The idea is that instead of you're only allowed to go minus 3 dB, which is the loudest, we say we're going to go to minus 23 dB, which is over here, over a whole long amount of time. Which means I can actually go really loud here, but if I go a little less loud over here, then over time, it will come down to minus 23 dB. So it's safe to say that our dialogue lives somewhere at the minus 23 dB line nowadays. And as you see, this gives me a lot more range to book a huge explosion and to make the music super loud. The increase in dynamic range that we got over time makes it that in a cinema it sounds fantastic, but in your living room, this amount of volume change is extraordinary. Well, this was a little lesson in between. Let's go back on our walk. Our audio is done. We have our dialogue pristine clear. You can hear everything. We add a whole bunch of layers of Foley. Foley is artists that are actually making all the sounds and the footsteps and the door creaks and everything. Damn, that's a fun job. But okay, that aside, you got your sound effects built in, all the explosions are laid in there. The composer comes with a whole bunch of music tracks. Now all these tracks come together and they get mixed on a massive mixing board in a big cinema room with your Dolby Atmos. There are speakers in the ceiling, there are speakers everywhere. This is where most films, and unfortunately a lot of television series also, get mixed. And I think that that is where things go wrong. Films are getting mixed for theater, which is amazing because it sounds incredibly good in theater. And like I said earlier in the beginning, I don't hear people complaining that they need subtitles in theater. No, because it is mixed well. People put all the money and effort to mix these films in these beautiful theater rooms, and it will translate perfectly to all the other theaters. But now this film comes onto Netflix and you turn it on your television, which doesn't have the best speakers. And guess what? Your room is really small and your room is not acoustically treated. So where this sound sounded beautifully in a cinema room, it does not translate to your living room. There is a lot of air in a cinema room, and that air absorbs sound. It works like a compressor. So if there is a lot of space between you and the speaker, you can push up that explosion way louder, and it still will be manageable because of all the air that is around you. And also the room around you is acoustically treated. So it absorbs a lot of these big booms and the loud music, and you don't have that in your living room. And unfortunately, they don't go back into a mix to make a mix in a small room on small speakers. This should happen, but unfortunately it doesn't. I even know that all Netflix series have to be mixed to the Dolby Atmos standard. And most rooms that have Dolby Atmos are these big rooms. So now these television series that you're watching at home are actually mixed for a theater where they never play. And I understand, because the whole team, the producers, the director, they're all sitting in that mix, and it is sexy in that room. That room sounds amazing. And everybody gives each other high fives in the end, and it's like, wow, this sounds the best. But it doesn't translate. And then going to a small room for an extra 3 days to remix what you had, to work in small untreated rooms like our living rooms are, just ain't so sexy. And I think that's a big part of the problem. We could do that. I don't even think that financially this would be a problem. You could easily do that. 2 days, 3 days in a room. We're talking about points of a percentage of what the film costs. Netflix and all the other streamers have to figure out another way to add that in your in their menu system, but that should be possible, right? So there you have it. I think, personally, that the biggest problem is that films and television series that you watch at home are mixed for theaters and not your house. This is also the reason why smaller films, lower budget films, A24 films, often sound better at home because they often are mixed in smaller rooms. If the budget of the film is lower overall, they go to smaller mixing rooms, and it translates so much better to your home cinema system. Having been to these rooms, and I've worked on television series that were mixed in cinema rooms, I totally think that as soon as we start adding a couple more days to do a second mix that is not for cinema, we could drastically change this. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you guys think is the reason that we can't hear the dialogue at home anymore?